We're hot. Grand Rising, everyone. Grand Rising, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well this rising. Grand Rising to the chat. Grand Rising to the new subscribers. And Grand Rising to those just listening and receiving the information. What's going on, Free? What's going on, Bones? Grand Rising, everyone. Grand Rising, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well this rising. Grand Rising to the chat. So I spoke and y'all couldn't hear me. New subscribers and Grand Rising to those just listening and receiving information. What's going on, Free? What's going on, Bones? Give me some ones in the chat if you can hear me.
Grand Rising, everyone. How you guys doing? Hope you're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to get some work in.
I know I am. Grand Rising, Grand Rising. So, who is it? Sorry, habit. That must be Bones. Grand Rising, Bones.
Grand Rising. Switch devices.
So can everyone hear me?
Mic check 1 2 1 2.
All right, got you coming in. Everybody sound all right in the chat? All right. So Grand Rising, I am Flying Squirrel. Grand Rising, Marlon P. Grand Rising, Oak Cliff. Grand Rising, Copper Color Queen. Grand Rising, Enrique. Grand Rising, Joe 47. What am I missing? Grand Rising, You Don't Want It. Grand Rising, LJ Free. Grand Rising, Celestial Love. Make sure we got everybody. Hopefully everyone's doing well this rising. Hopefully everyone got some good rest. If not, I don't know, you might want to stay out of construction zone today. I don't want anybody having any accidents.
Did you give David Corey his Grand Rising? Grand Rising, David.
My bad, David. In fact, he was the second one in the chat today, right behind Oak Cliff. Greet us with a great rising. That's what's up.
And first thing this rising.
Want to go ahead and give a shout out to someone who signed up for the forum, the Conscious Assembly forum yesterday. So give me one moment so I can properly give you a shout out. For those that have yet to register with the forum, it's easier for us to recognize you if your username is the same username with your that you use when you are in the chat. But if not, you're not able to do that, that's fine as well. I want to send a shout out to TMB Taylor, registered with the forum yesterday. So that's what's up. Hopefully you was able to see what we was doing yesterday as we were preparing for the show today and the build today, so you were able to have access to all the links. We're in the process of upgrading the chat, so it's not accessible at this particular point in time. I'm sure Bones will be able to explain all that technical stuff. That ain't what I do. I stopped doing that like 10, 15 years ago. So. Grand Rising, Carrie Bay. Good to see you, bro.
Hey, Carrie.
Grand Rising, Carrie.
So let's go ahead and get this public service announcement. So this episode of a Tactinus Assembly is brought to you. Well, this episode of Cab Grand Rising. The Cab Grand Rising show is brought to you by Tactinus Assembly, where the real work gets done. And you may be thinking, for those of you who are new, who are a Tactinus Assembly? Who are we and what are we about? Tactinus Assembly is a non-profit organization dedicated to raising up indigenous Americans' voices by using genealogy, also known as family history or family tree, which is a study of families and the tracing their lineage and history. Genealogists use oral interviews, historical records, genetic analysis, and other records to obtain information about a family and to demonstrate kinship, pedigree of its members. Our core values are the foundation of our company, which is essential to our success, and serves as a lens through which we evaluate every business decision. And those core values are, but are not limited to, integrity, which is known in doing what is right; respect, which is treating others the way you want to be treated; responsibility, which is embracing opportunities to contribute; and servant leadership, which is serving the common good. And like we always like to explain to our new listeners, the Tactinus Assembly is here to help you do your genealogy and connect to your ancestors, whoever they may be, whether they are American Indians, Native Americans, Africans, Black Dutch, Black Irish, Black Europeans, or just non-melanated or lightly melanated Dutch, Irish, or Europeans. Our goal is to help you connect and find out who you are. And if you so choose to take advantage of the information that we provide that will allow you to help yourself and your community be financially independent, we'll help you with that. And if you should take that information to help your tribe, we'll also help you with that free of charge with all that we have at our disposal. It's just a matter of reaching out to us at tactinusassembly.com or logging into our forum at tactinusassembly.com/forum and allowing us to help you. With that, I switch over and let the panel take over and let us know if there's anything that I missed, because I feel like I missed something. Anyway.
No, you covered it. Grand Rising, Marlon P.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. So, Bones, what we doing today? Yesterday we had to recover from the body blows of the construction because you was dropping haymakers on us yesterday. You and Copper Indio with the Huguenots that had infiltrated specific groups of the secret societies that were affiliated directly with the KKK that were expediting our ancestors' demise, if it were. If you missed that show, you can always go onto the website or go onto the YouTube page and catch up. And also check the chat to get a brief synopsis. Well, check the forum to get a brief synopsis. So, before we get started, let's go ahead and set the stage.
Warning, warning, warning. Hard hats, pickaxe, shovels, boots required. Warning.
That's right. It's a hard hat zone. Get those hard hats on. Get that gear on. Get your protective garments on. Somebody had on shin guards yesterday. I can't remember who it was. But put them on too if you need them.
I think it was Big Hawk.
Oh,
He came
yes.
prepared.
So, Bones, what are we picking up from today? We're going to go over the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We can go over the Knights of the White Camelia.
Okay. I got it pulled up. I'll put the link in the chat. I Am Flying Squirrel says speeding will result in a double fine. Yes, you cannot be speeding while we're on the construction site. And no one should be driving because everybody caught the cab, so it's all good. Unless you put a scooter in the trunk. So the link is in the chat. And we're covering the Knights of the White Camelia. And what you're going to find, what I found interesting, is that there are a lot of knights now during this time, 1800s. So it's going to be, that title is going to play a significant role in what's happening with our ancestors. So we're reading from Wikipedia, and as you know, the links are placed in the chat, so you can actually do your diligence, do your research, and there are sources and notes put in the Wikipedia page to do your research to either confirm or debunk what's on this page, realizing that this is just one version of the information. So this is what we're going to roll with, and hopefully, we get some subject matter experts or some Indians that can confirm or debunk what we're saying. Because remember, it's about getting it right. It's not about being right.
And also remember, a lot of these societies are participants in Reconstruction.
Thanks, Bones. That's exactly right. And they're directly responsible for Reconstruction. Grand Rising Pamela Hall. She says, has anyone seen the show on Netflix? The family go check it out we'll add someone to a lot of what we can find out. So did you put the title of the show in the chat, Pamela Hall? If you would, that would be helpful. Thanks.
The Family.
Oh, it's called The Family.
I got you, Family.
My bad, Pamela. My bad. Awkward.
It's all good.
Moving on as if that conversation never happened. The Knights of the White Camelia was an American political terrorist organization that operated in the southern United States in the 19th century, similar to an associated with the Ku Klux Klan, supporting white supremacy and opposing freedmen's rights. So they're already admitting that this was an American political terrorist organization. That don't sound good.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone ever looked up what the term terrorist means? Let's do that. Terrorist. A person who uses unlawful violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. For commercial aircraft were hijacked by terrorists, or it says that's an example. 4 commercial aircraft were hijacked by terrorists. The adjective is unlawfully using violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. What's the etymology of terrorist? Let me look it up.
Don't you always hear America is in a war against terrorism?
Always.
Who are the real Americans, and where's this real terrorism coming from?
Well, sounds like the terrorism is coming from the white supremacist groups, or the people who claim to be white supremacists. Go ahead, Bones.
But it's kind of funny, like you said, they're labeled as terrorist groups, political terrorist groups. Try it now and watch what happened to you. but they revealed in history. But you try it now and watch what happened.
Exactly. So the etymology of terrorist is in the modern sense of 1945, especially in reference to Jewish tactics against the British Palestine. What? Read that again. I know, right? That needs some sound effects for that one. Earlier, let me read it again. It says, in modern sense, 1944, especially in reference to Jewish tactics against the British Palestine. Was anybody aware that was that was the etymology? It goes on to read earlier, it was used of extremist revolutionaries in Russia who attempted to demoralize the government by terror, 1866. And Jacobins during the French Revolution, 1795. From French terroriste, see terror plus east. Also see terrorism. The term now normally refers to a member of a clandestine or expatriate organization aiming to coerce an established government by acts of violence against it or its subjects. The tendency of one party's terrorist to be another's guerrilla or freedom fighter was noted in reference to the British actions in Cyprus in 1956 and the war in Rhodesia, 1973. The word terrorist has been applied, at least retroactively, to the Marquis resistance in occupied French in World War II, as in The Spectre, October 20th, 1979. They go them French. It's amazing how they always find themselves in there.
And you can hear the lectio difficilior all in that definition. It's threaded throughout the entire thing. That hard overlaid reading. Read it over once or twice and put it in context with what we've definitely seen they've done in history and whatnot, and who we know these lines are tying back to. And it really shows you a lot. What's being said, what's being omitted, the whole nine.
Exactly. Peace, Black Indian Immigrated, and peace, LaDarian Woods. Glad y'all was able to catch a cab this rising. We are reading the Knights of the White Camelia, and I was just looking up the word terrorism, the regular definition and the etymology, because this organization is terrorized. It's categorized as an American political terrorist organization. So let's look at some of the history. It goes on to state that the Knights of the White Camelia was founded by a Democrat-Confederate Army Colonel, Alcibiades DeBlanc. It's Alcibiades. Okay, I messed that up. DeBlanc. On May 22nd, 1867, in Franklin, Louisiana. Author Christian Long stated, its members were pledged to support the supremacy of the white race, to oppose the amalgamation of the races, to resist the social and political encroachment of so-called carpetbaggers. Wait. Rewind that.
Okay.
Say it again, Bones.
Oh, nothing important.
We wanted you to play that back.
Its members were pledged to support the supremacy of the white race, to oppose the amalgamation of races, to resist the social and political encroachment of the so-called carpetbaggers. I remember what the carpetbaggers were, right? And to restore white control of the government. Historian Nicholas Lemann calls
it. Hold up. To restore white control of the government. So to restore white control of the government, who is the government?
Sounds like we are now.
That wording is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like these organizations were formed when we had an overwhelming majority in the government and republicanism in the early 1870s, early 1860s. So then it goes on to read, their tactics, which included harassment, floggings, and sometimes murder, produced a reign of terror among the state's black population during the summer and fall of 1868. So we got to remember what the definition of black means, because early up in this paragraph it reads, to oppose the amalgamation of the races. Remember, there was a mixing of races going on at this time, which is where you got the Cajuns, the Creoles, the Métis, your people of color, or free people of color. Now you have your black Irish, your black Dutch, your black Europeans. You also now have the swarthy American Indians, or copper-colored American Indians, who have taken on the name or taken on the title of being black Dutch, black Irish, and black European, so that they could potentially keep their land, which they end up losing anyway because of the laws that we saw in 1861 and 1862. But now they've changed their identity. So now all these groups are considered the black population. So let's keep that in mind. So then it goes on to read, chapters existed primarily in the southern part of the deep south. Now, why is that important? They call it the deep south for a reason. So let's look at what the definition of the deep south is, so we can give you an appropriate or accurate picture. Because y'all do realize that some southern states do not consider some southern states southern. Go talk to people in South Carolina and see if they consider Virginia a southern state. They'll tell you no. Even though that's supposed to be the home of the Confederate. So let's look up the Deep South. The Deep South is a cultural and geographic sub-region in the southern United States. Historically, it was differentiated as those states most depended on plantations and Slav societies during the pre-Civil War period. The Deep South is commonly referred to as the Cotton States, which, given that production of cotton was a primary cash crop. The term Deep South is defined in a variety of ways. Most definitions include the states Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Texas and Florida are sometimes included due to being peripheral states having coastlines with the Gulf of Mexico, their history of slavery, and as being part of the historical Confederate States of America. The eastern part of Texas is the westernmost extension of the Deep South, while North Florida is also part of the Deep South region, typically the area north of Ocala. Arkansas is sometimes included or else considered in the peripheral or rim south rather than the Deep South. The 7 states that seceded the United States before the firing on Fort Sumter and the start of the American Civil War, and who originally formed the Confederate States of America. In order of the secession, they are South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. The first 6 states to secede were those that held the largest number of Slavs. Ultimately, the Confederacy included 11 states. At large, a large part of the original Cotton Belt. This was considered to extend from eastern North Carolina to South Carolina and through the Gulf states as far west as East Texas, and including those parts of western Tennessee and eastern Arkansas in the Mississippi embayment. Some of this is quarter-minus with the Black Belt, originally referring to upland areas of Alabama and Mississippi with fertile soil, which were developed for cotton under slave labor. The term came to be used for much of the Cotton Belt, which had a high percentage of African American slave labor. Remember, African Americans could be considered as your swarthy Europeans, whether they swarthy Irish, swarthy Dutch, swarthy Europeans. So it's highly dependent on that labor. So I wanted to put everything in context when it talks about your Deep South. Notice that there are a couple of states that were not mentioned, Virginia and Maryland, even though Virginia is considered the home of the Confederate. So keep that in mind. So where are we at? It goes on to read, historian George C. Rabel noted that although the Republicans saw evidence of massive conspiracy in the outrages in Louisiana as elsewhere, white terrorists were not organized beyond the local level. Unlike the Ku Klux Klan, which drew much of its membership from lower-class Southerners, primarily Confederate veterans, the White Camelia consisted mainly of upper-class Southerners, including physicians, landowners, newspaper editors, doctors, and officers. Wait a minute.
You can see the split. Pay attention to the split in both societies.
So you have I gotta rewind this back. So you basically have even a class of of what is to be considered the white supremacist groups. So these are your White Camelia, Knights of the White Camelia. And they are your more affluent upper class Southerners, physicians, landowners, newspaper editors, doctors, and officers, individuals that had more influence and affluence. They were also usually Confederate veterans, the upper part of the antebellum society. It began to decline despite a convention in 1869. The more aggressive people joined the White League or similar paramilitary organizations that organized in the mid-1870s. By 1870, the original Knights of the White Camelia had mostly ceased to exist. Amongst its members were Louisiana Judge Taylor Beatty, who led the Thibodeau Massacre of 1887. We're going to stick a pin in that Thibodeau Massacre. Goes on and says earlier, David Theophilus Stafford of Alexandria, prior to his election as sheriff of Rapides Parish, was a member of the Knights. Wait, what? David Theophilus Stafford of Alexandria, prior to his election as sheriff of Rapides Parish, was a member of the Knights. He joined the Citizens League and was at Canal Street during the Battle of Liberty Place. Stick a pin in that because we're going to go to it. So
and also notice, a lot of these things that popped off later on in Louisiana, they were already putting their people in place.
Say that part again, Bones.
You can see they're putting their people in place for the events that take place in Louisiana, the riots.
Right.
All these wars that's finna pop off. Because if you notice, this is the third one that's a sheriff. Yesterday we read two that were sheriffs.
Exactly. Grand Rising, Doodle Vision. You know, you always got a seat. So if you get a chance, come on to the panel. So the legacy of the Knights of the White Camelia reads, 1939, Time reported that the West Virginia's anti-Semite George E. Detheridge was describing himself as a national commander of the Knights of the White Camelia. In the 1990s, the Ku Klux Klan, based in eastern Texas, adopted the name. According to the book Soldiers of God, the New Age White Camelia was a strong influence in Vidor, Texas. Ever since the return of the White Camelia name, so-called White Camelia, sometimes spelled with a K, the Klan groups have also emerged in Louisiana and Florida. So they re-emerged in the 1990s. So what are they gearing up for? I guess that's a more important question.
What happened? Hold on. Let's pause for a second. They came back around in the 1990s. What was happening in 89 and 90? What was going on? Then we had Rodney King, all this racial issues and stuff going on. If you notice, every time it goes mainstream, these groups reform again. They go hand in hand with the media.
Back and Doodle Vision says Louisiana was the origin of the black codes, right? Because that got started when the territory as America was under New France, and they were called the Codes de Noir. And he says, Doodle Vision says, Vidor, Texas is where they dragged James Byrd. So there you go. So again, that's why the timelines are so important. Puts things in its proper context.
Yeah, you'll notice after they did it to Louisiana, this is when they spreaded it over the nation.
So let's look at the Thibodeau Massacre in 1887. And this is 1 year after the massacre in Louisiana, right? Which is happened in 1886, right?
Yep, they are. It's a couple of them, and they go back to back to back, all during Reconstruction. It's kind of funny you never told about these wars.
We need to also look at to see what Indian wars were happening at this time as well. I'll pull that up after I read this. The Thibodeau Massacre was a racial attack mounted by white paramilitary groups in Thibodeau, Louisiana, in November 1887. It followed a 3-week strike during the critical harvest season by an estimated 10,000 workers against sugarcane plantations.
It was a what?
A strike, a 3-week strike during the critical harvest season by an estimated 10.
If you can strike, that means you're getting paid. Just clarifying.
Yeah.
These not slaves. Nobody being held against their will.
Right.
They're being paid to do a service. That's it. We're just pointing that out.
Perspective.
Something to think about. It says this happened during the critical harvest season by an estimated 10,000 workers against sugarcane plantations in 4 parishes: Lafourche, Terrebonne, St. Mary, and Assumption parishes. The strike was the largest in the industry and the first conducted by a formal labor organization, the Knights of Labor. There go them Knights again. We're going to stick a pin in that and come back to the Knights of Labor. At planters' request, the state sent a militia to protect strike breakers, and work resumed on some plantations. Black workers, now remember who the blacks are. It's a different amalgamation of swarthy people, not just our ancestors. And their families were evicted from the plantations in Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes and retreated to Thibodeau. So, let's look at this for a second. It said the strike was the largest in the industry and first conducted by a formal labor organization, the Knights of Labor. Then it says at planters' request. Who is planter? Make sure I didn't miss anything. Said at planters' request, the state sent in militia to protect strikebreakers, and work resumed on some plantation. Black workers and their families were evicted from the plantations in Lafourche, Terrebonne parishes, and retreated to Thibodaux. Now, it seems that these black workers were not part of the organization, right? So they weren't protected under the union. Grand Rising Copper Indio, Grand Rising Macadam one. So let's look at the Knights of Labor and see who they are. Because remember, this is the second Knights that we're reading about. Just saying it's get them hard hats on. Knights of Labor, excuse me, Knights of Labor, KFL, officially Noble and Holy Order of the Knights of Labor, was an American labor federation active in the late 19th century, especially in the 1880s. It operated in the United States as well as in Canada, and had chapters also in Great Britain and Australia. So they were national, or international. Its most important leaders were Terence Reed Powderly and stepbrother Joseph Bath. The Knights promoted the social and cultural uplift of the working man, rejected socialism and anarchism, demanded an 8-hour day, and promoted the producer's ethic of republicanism in the United States. In some cases, it acted as a labor union, negotiating with employers, but it was never well organized or funded. After a rapid expansion in the mid-1880s, which is during this time of the strike, it suddenly lost its new members and became a small operation again. So now we know who the Knights of Labor are. So, who were the planters? Because it says at planters' request, the state sent in militia to protect strikebreakers. And correct me if I'm wrong, these planters seem like they were people that were not only the landowners but also the workers. So could these be the sharecroppers that were hiring these workers that happen to have a union? Could these be the last remnants of the quote-unquote blacks that owned land before they got kicked out? Because it says at planters' request, the state sent in militia to protect strikebreakers. If the union were the ones that were striking, the Knights of Labor, and the quote-unquote blacks, who we know are a mixed amalgamation of swarthy people, they weren't a part of this union, then while the Knights
of Labor...
Go ahead.
Remember with the Knights of Labor, we did them, went over them last week. The thing with the Knights of Labor was they didn't care about race or religion. There was that one labor union that would take everybody else that wasn't accepted in the others. That's why they wasn't funded, and the strikes kind of broke them down. Okay.
So, and the reason why I asked that question is because they're involved, they're striking, which basically means they're either picketing or they're standing on the side of the road and they're harassing the people that are breaking the strikes. So they're separate from the planters. So the planters requested the state send in the militia to protect the strikebreakers, and work resumed on some plantation. So that ends that sentence. Then it goes on to say black workers and their families were evicted from the plantation in Lafourche, Terrebonne parishes, and retreated to Thibodaux. So that means either these black workers were kicked off the plantation because they were planting, they were kicked off the plantation because they were part of the strikebreakers, or they were kicked off the plantation because they were part of the Knights of Labor. But it doesn't specify. But anyway, I just
look at it this way.
Go ahead.
Look at it this way. All they were kicked off because they actually owned the house and the property, and they refused to let these workers come and work.
Say that again, please.
Remember, it can also be that they owned the farm, they owned the house, and these workers showed up to work, and the melanated owners was like, no, there is no work until we get better deals and this and that on what we're paying for labor.
Okay.
Remember, Remember the 2 acts that we read yesterday that was signed for them to start confiscating land.
Right. Got it.
All this is going on at the same time. So if you removing them, remember they're using every mechanism possible to remove people and take their property.
Okay. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you. Grand Rising, no sellout. So we're going over the we're going over the Thibodeau massacre.
Alrighty.
So here's where things get a little squirrely. It says tensions broke out in violence on November 23rd, 1887, and the local white paramilitary forces attacked black workers and their families. So these black workers, like basically Bones was saying, were the planters that called for the protection. And these workers and their families were attacked in Thibodeau. Although the total number of casualties is unknown, at least 35 black people were killed in the next 3 days. More historians believe 50 were killed, and as many as 300 overall killed, wounded, or missing, making it one of the most violent labor disputes in U.S. history. Pause.
Label what? So how did slavery is just a labor dispute?
It says as many as 300 overall were killed, wounded, and missing, making it one of the most violent labor disputes in U.S. history. Victims reportedly included elders, women, and children. All those killed were African American. Remember, African American could mean swarthy Dutch, swarthy Irishmen and women, swarthy Europeans, and our ancestors, the swarthy American Indians, that took on those titles to stay down south and keep their land. It goes on to say the massacre and the passage by white Democrats of discriminatory state legislation included disenfranchisement of most blacks, ended the organizing of sugar workers for decades until the 1940s. According to Aracene, the defeated sugar workers returned to the plantations on their employers' terms.
Hold on, but if the sugar workers been forming up, how was they ever slaves? I'm confused. One minute they slaves, the next minute they are employees. Or is a slave and an employee the same thing?
And if you think about it,
Like Kanye, tell it.
I know, right? Slavery was a choice. If you think about it, if you look at it from this perspective, remember the definition of slave and prison changed. There was a trade, if you will, after the 13th Amendment happened. There were no more slaves. Slaves basically went from being a people to a noun. And you went from being slaves to a prisoner. So the work or the action didn't change, just the definition. And in many cases, the place where you did time changed.
I mean, look at it. That's one of the greatest things. That's their greatest tool. Because a lot of things did not move. They just renamed it. And over time taught you the new name and you forgot its original name. Masters of the illusions.
Reconstruction. Changing the way we look at things, changing the way we move, changing the way we think. Something to think about.
Reconstruct has a lot to do with your mentality. I put that in the chat yesterday with the etymology of what reconstruct means. And the whole sense of construct has to do with your mind.
Copy India put something in the chat that I'm going to read later after we finish with this Thibodeau massacre and the rest of the stuff. And it comes right in on time. because I was talking about corresponding with the Indian Wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is interesting. Wow. Let me put this in the chat.
Driving like it's hot.
Give me a second. Because we can't forget there were still Indian wars going on in the 1800s, right? They didn't just stop because names got changed.
Correct.
So let's get ready. So we're looking at the American Indian Wars. The American Indian Wars started in 1540, but they did not end until 1924. I repeat. The American Indian Wars started in 1540 and did not end till 1924. So there were still wars going on in 1886.
Guess what war was going on in the 1830s and 1840s when all this was popping off, starting to pop off? Guess who they were fighting? The Second Seminole War. The Second Seminole War goes hand in hand with the Trail of Tears and all this other stuff that was going on.
So go ahead and can you read that?
Let me pull it up. It says the Second Seminole War, also known as the Florida War, was a conflict from 1835 to 1842 in Florida between various groups of Native Americans collectively known as Seminoles and the United States. Part of a series of conflicts called the Seminole Wars. The Second Seminole War, often referred to as the Seminole War, is regarded as the longest and most costly of the Indian conflicts of the United States.
Stop.
How many times?
Repeat that part. Repeat that. Repeat that part, please.
It says the Second Seminole War, often referred to as the Seminole War, is regarded as the longest and most costly of the Indian conflict of the United States.
Whoa.
So remember, there were Indians. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bones.
It would make sense. It would be one of the longest and most costly. Because you can throw the Civil War and all this mess that's going on right in the middle of all this. The relocating of people out the South, running them from out the South. Ain't Florida part of the South?
Yeah.
To get to Florida, you got to go through Georgia just to get to Florida. So yeah, I know you wasn't bypassing and just leaving people here. No.
And Doodle Vision brought up something that we can never forget. He said the Second Seminole War equals Red Stick War continuation. It was a continuation of the Red Stick War. So, and then it goes on, because Cop-Up said this, he says west of the Mississippi. So I'm going to put this in the chat too. That's the reason why timelines are important, because they're trying to make it seem as though all the Indians are gone, and they're not. Remember, even after the Trail of Tears, there were Indians left. Remember, some took on the names of swarthy Dutch, swarthy Europeans, swarthy Irish to keep their lands. And then there was that remnant that was like, "No, we fighting. You gonna have to kill me to take this." And that war didn't end until 1924. So it says the series of conflicts in western United States between Indians, American settlers, and United States Army were generally known as the Indian Wars. Many of these conflicts occurred during and after the Civil War until the closing of the frontier in about 1890. However, regions of the West that were settled before the Civil War saw significant conflicts prior to 1860, such as in Texas, New Mexico, Utah, Oregon, California, and Washington State. Various statistics have been developed concerning the devastation of these wars on the peoples involved. Gregory Michno used record dealings with figures as a direct result of engagements and concluding that of 21,586 total casualties tabulated in the survey, military personnel and civilians accounted for 6,596 or 31%, while Indian casualties totaled 14,990, 69%, for a period of 1850 through 1890. However, Michno says that he used the Army's estimates in almost every case, and the number of casualties in his studies are inherently biased towards Army estimations. His work includes almost nothing on Indian war parties. Go figure. And he states that Army records are often incomplete. According to Michno, more conflicts with Indians occurred in the states bordering Mexico than in the interior states. Arizona ranked highest with 310 known battles fought within the state's borders. Wait a minute.
Come again?
And Arizona ranked highest with 310 battles fought within the state's boundaries between Americans and Indians. Also, Arizona ranked highest of the states in deaths from the wars. At least 4,340 people were killed, including both the settlers and the Indians. Over twice as many as occurred in Texas, the second highest ranked state. Most of the deaths in Arizona were caused by the Apaches. Michno also says that 51% of the battles took place in Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico between 1850 and 1890, as well as 37% of the casualties in the country west of the Mississippi River. So here's what kicked it off in the plains, and then we're going to get back to the East Coast. It says Pikes Peak Gold Rush in 1859 introduced a substantial white population into the Front Range of the Rockies, supported by a trading lifeline that crossed the central Great Plains, advancing settlement following the passage of the Homestead Act and the growing transcontinental railroads following the Civil War, further destabilizing the situation. Why is it not mentioned that the railroad was up and running at this time? You don't hear nothing about a railroad when they're talking about all this that's going on with these white supremacists.
You got to remember railroads and steamboats. They'll tell you a ferry, but what does a ferry run off of?
Steam.
Oops.
Doodle Vision says Arizona's wars were a confederacy of the Gulf Indians and Khalifa against Europeans. He says, and remember, California was still part of Mexico when the gold rush began, but seated in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So it says advancing settlement following passage of the Homestead Act and growing transcontinental railways following the Civil War further destabilized the situation, placing white settlers into the direct competition for the land and resources of the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountain West. Further factors included discovery of gold in the Black Hills, resulting in the gold rush of 1875 through 1878, and in the Montana during the Montana Gold Rush of 1862 through 1863. And the opening of the Bronze Man Trail, which led to the Red Cloud's War and later the Great Sioux War of 1876 and 1877. Miners, ranchers, and settlers expanded to the plain, and this led to increasing conflicts with the Indian population of the West. Many tribes fought American settlers at one time or another, from the Utes of the Great Basin to the Nez Perce tribes of Idaho. Both the Sioux and the Northern Plains and the Apaches of the Northwest waged the most aggressive warfare, led by resolute militant leaders such as Red Cloud and Crazy Horse. Sioux were relatively new arrivals to the plains, as they had been sedentary farmers in the Great Lakes region previously. They moved west, displacing other Indian tribes and became feared warriors. The Apaches supplemented their economy by raiding other tribes, and they practiced warfare to avenge the death of their kinsmen. So then it goes on to read, it says, during the American Civil War, Army units were withdrawn to fight the war in the East. They were replaced by the voluntary infantry and cavalry raised by the states of California and Oregon, by the Western territorial governments, or by the local militia. These units fought the Indians and kept open communications with the East, holding the West for the Union and defeating the Confederate attempt to capture New Mexico territory. After 1865, national policy called for all Indians either to assimilate into the American population as citizens or live peacefully on reservations. I'm going to read that again. After 1865, national policy called for all Indians either to assimilate into American population as citizens or to live peacefully on reservations. Raids and wars between tribes were not allowed, and armed Indian bands of reservations were the responsibility of the army to round up and return. So by 1865, you were either to assimilate into the American population or live peacefully on a reservation. So what does that mean? Doodle Vision says Apaches were raw meat eating Mongolians. So what does it mean to assimilate into the population? You take on one of their citizen titles, right?
Yep.
Self-identification. You are no longer an Indian. You are either a swarthy European, or you could pass for white. It's that simple. Either you are a swarthy European or you pass for white. So let's go back to the sugar strike. It says the sugarcane harvest and processing was a complex series of events that had to be closely coordinated among a large labor force pushed to work to physical extremes. Sugar plantations were described as factories in the field and had a high death rate during slavery times. Conditions were little improved after the Reconstruction. Why would they change after the Reconstruction? All they did was change the name and move people. A major issue arose in the early 1880s when the plantation owners began cutting wages and forcing sugar workers to accept scrip.
Hold on.
Yeah, I know.
How are these people slaves if you cut wages? Sound like employees to me. But then again, they can be the same thing at this time.
It says a major issue arose in the early 1880s. What would be the definition of the early 1880s? Just out of curiosity. What would you consider early 1880s?
That was 1810s, 1805.
Yeah, or either all the way up to 1825, right?
Yeah, around there.
So when did the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War happen? In the 1860s. That would be considered the middle or late 1800s, right? 1880s, right?
To late.
Okay. So it says a major issue arose in the early 1880s when plantation owners began cutting wages. Began means to start.
So people getting paid are paid employees in the early 1800s.
Had been receiving pay. Otherwise, you can't start making cuts.
Exactly. And forcing sugar workers to accept scrip for pay due to declining international sugar market. These pasteboard tickets were redeemable only at company stores, which operated at...
That sounds like a check. That sounds like a check. Oh, so you ain't gonna give me no money, man. You gonna give me a check. I owe you.
System
Who they
changes,
trying to
way
fool?
of doing
Who
things
they
changing.
trying to fool? Who are they think they fooling?
So a company script is script issued by a company to pay its employees. It can only be exchanged in company stores owned by the employers. In the UK, such truck systems have been formally outlawed under the Truck Act.
Hiring package.
J. Susquehanna says, white prisoners, slaves of England, aka your Slavs, your Europeans. That's right, Jay.
Bingo.
And then it says, so as the plantation kept the books, often illiterate workers were increasingly bound by debt and unable to get free. So what were they bound by? Bound by debt and unable to get free from what? Free from debt.
Predators.
So debt was a form of slavery, which is now punishable by being put into a incarceration for not paying your debt. Due division says bound debt, aka taxes. It said it was required by law to pay off the debt. Workers became essentially bound to the plantation in a state similar to slavery. That's what it was. Similar to slavery means what? Means like. Most of the cane workers, exactly, ish. Most of the cane workers were black, but there were also whites. The Knights of Labor used a script issue to organize workers, and thousands joined the group. In October 1877, Duquesne F. Kerner, a millionaire planter, founded the statewide Louisiana Sugar Producers Association, LSPA, consisting of 200 of the largest planters in the state, and served as president. The powerful LPSA lobbied in the federal government for sugar tariffs, funding to support levies to protect their lands, and research to increase crop yields. For the next decade, these members also worked to gain control over their labor. They adopted a uniform pay scale, and within 80% of the wages, excuse me, until the end of the harvest season, and maintained stores required workers to accept pay in script redeemable only at their stores. Due Division says, look at all the Western movies. The farmers couldn't pay taxes, and the crooked sheriffs would take their land. That's true. But here's the thing that we gotta remember. There was one particular time where white people didn't even own any land down south. So how in 1877 that the only planters that owned land were them? That you have to.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
planters could have been the melanated people.
And that's what that's the point I was going at. Don't make the assumption that only the planters were white, because that's not true. Because you can't.
Remember also what they said on these plantations. There were whites out there in the fields working too.
Mm-hmm.
But why history never talks about that?
They do. They say they were Slavs. They say they were Slavs. They were there. Slavs is a group of people, right? I'm just saying.
Yeah, but it's overkill because they give us an entire freaking Black History Month. So let's be real.
Yeah, we know.
It's obvious what they're trying to do with that narrative.
You know, that's
it. Think about it. They push the narrative that white people don't like black people, don't want to be around them. So how do you have them working side by side?
Mm-hmm.
When all this hate's supposed to be going on, how are they working side by side?
Doodle Vision said, thus spawned Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Frank and Jesse James, etc., to rob the government, aka banks, and they were glorified for doing so. Robbing the union.
Yeah, what we read yesterday, they got paid by the Confederate government to do it.
Mm-hmm. And remember, how do you have a large organization, or how do you have a large number of quote-unquote swarthy Republicans in office that's controlling things in the South.
Right.
If they were slaves.
But also remember this too. Go back to the Indian Wars. When in the Indian Wars did they penetrate the South? When?
It was after the Civil War.
That's now.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Indian War on the Southern Indians.
Say it again.
This is the Southern War on the Southern Indians. Remember when we started this, what did a lot of the Lenni Lenape and a couple of other tribes said? They wasn't allowing the white-skinned Europeans to come in the South. They said they would never be able to purchase land in the South. You notice before the Revolution and the Civil War, they fighting the outskirts.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden they're in the center in the South. This is that Indian War.
Exactly.
No wonder they dump so much other information on top of it to hide what's actually happening. Like the crux of what's actually happening. And why everything else is transpiring. Because the war is on the American Indian.
Exactly.
And they don't want to just tell you straight up and plain. We did all this kind of recent to put you guys in the position that you're in now, and we're hiding your identity from you. That's a bit too much.
Doodle Vision said the James gang set up shop in my hometown, and they fought alongside the Red Man. And later in the same newspaper article, they were called Colors. Again, yeah, changing the narrative by changing the title of people.
Mm-hmm.
Lectio difficilior.
Right. And if you're willing to go back and allow your brain to think along those lines, it's easy to stay mixed up and confused.
Because like I said, just study the Indian Wars. You notice the Indian Wars stopped in the Virginia area. Then the next time they mention Indian Wars again is with the Seminoles. So what happened to the Indians in between Virginia and Florida?
Reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
They reconstructing the story. They had to reconstruct the story. They had to change the narrative.
Right.
Iron Flying Squirrel said Kamehameha died in 1819, the ruler of Hawaii.
That's recent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just in context of everything we've been told.
Yeah.
From that whole system, you came over on a boat from Africa. Like when the truth of what really has been happening on this land unfold, this is more recent than what many of us are probably ready to process.
Well,
still.
Well, let's look at it this way. What is said about the calendar? That it's 1,000 years off, right? Intentionally. That's what they talk about, right?
At least.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's at least 1,000 years off, what's today's date? What year are we in? If you subtract 1,000 from 2019, what do you get? 1919?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now that's a perspective for you right there.
Think about it. They never deny, and we all know when you study history, it's admitted that they added 1,000 years to the calendar.
But just the way he simplistically did that.
If you subtract 1,000 from 2019, you get 1919.
Yep.
So if you, with that mindset, and realizing what we're reading and how recent this was, how much more empowered do you feel to actually turn the wheel to get back through the door that you just left out of? You just left out of this door.
Doodle Vision says they put you in a chain gang in the 1880s and made you the 13th Amendment slaves. Exactly.
Just that recent.
Pamela Hall says, well, welcome to the year 1919. I mean, that's real talk. We're going to have to do a build on that. So those of you in the chat that's always typing in the forum, calendar, let's get it.
That'd be a good thing to jump on as a community.
Homework assignment. So with that, let's keep reading. We're still on the Thibodeau massacre. Remember, all this time, our ancestors are still fighting. There are still Indian wars going on, even in the late 1800s, going into the 1900s. Indians are still turning over land. The Indians still turned over land in the early 1900s, or what they call the 1900s, which actually would have been the 1800s. I'm just saying. So, in 1887, the Knights of Labor organized a major 3-week sugar strike against cane plantations, LaForce, Terrebonne, St. Mary, and Assumption parishes. Most plantations were idle. The strike was organized by the National Knights of Labor organization, who established local assembly 8404 in Shriver the preceding year. Now remember, these 4 parishes, who had just got basically banned to these 4 parishes? Oh, wait. The swarthy people, right? The people of color.
Yep.
So why would
did parishes begin as? Didn't James tell us that parishes started off as being like police state?
That's right.
Confinement areas.
Perspective.
Concentration camps.
Because now you're a citizen, so you need to go back to your cells. Doodle Vision says the Asians worked the railroads in the West, but who rebuilt the railroads along the Atlantic in the South during Reconstruction? New Age slaves, aka Indians, aka Negroes, aka colored, aka blacks.
That's the sound of the man working on the chain gang.
David Corey says they named the mortgage company Century 21. I know, right? Copper Color Queen says, I discovered that we weren't in the correct time a while ago and still blows my mind. Yeah, we got to get that right. So, y'all got a homework assignment. When did the time change and what was it when it changed? So, that's the chat's homework if y'all should choose to take it.
That 21st century also applies to the music industry, not music, but movie industry as well.
Yep, 21st Century Fox.
Theater.
Grand Rising Power Tam 9 Man. Yeah, we was just talking about that. We're in the year 1919.
It's making this Lectio Difficilior make a lot more sense, doesn't it? And who's the one changing all the times, trying to keep time away from the timekeepers? And what's their motive behind that?
Jay Sasquana says it changed when Europe changed. Doodle Vision says they're just Fox now. They're pushing the same narrative. Yeah, because we're talking about 21st Century Fox. They dropped the 21st Century and now they're just Fox. Because they're sly as a what? You got it. It says in October, labor representatives delivered demands to the LPSA that included an increase in wages of $1.25 a day, bi-weekly payments and payment of currency instead of post-board tickets, a script redeemable only at company stores. As the LPSA ignored the demands, the Knights of Labor called the strike for November 1st, time to coincide with the critical rolling period of the crop and when it had to be harvested and processed. The work stoppage threatened the entire sugarcane harvest for the year. The 1887 strike was the largest labor action in the industry, involving an estimated 10,000 workers, a tenth of whom were white. Stop. It was the first time a formal labor organization had led a strike in this region. What region are they leading this strike in? The 4 parishes where the majority of the swarthy people are. What's another way to get people to lose their land? Go on strike so they can't pay their bills, so they end up losing their land, right? Because if no one's harvesting the field, then you can't pay your bill.
And it's also a way to force you into dropping your standards of work, meaning that you know you got to pay bills and stuff. They want you to work for a lower wage. Hold out for too long, you end up accepting a lower wage to take care of your family.
Not only that, but it works both ways. If you're having to pay, because remember, some of our ancestors were some of these people that own these lands. They were some of the millionaires that own this land. Remember, like you said, the Europeans are just coming to the South through Civil War. They weren't able to infiltrate. Now they're able to infiltrate. So in the midst of land grabs and all that, all this is still going on. So they're not only affecting the Europeans, but they're more so affecting our ancestors. That's why they had the strikes in these parishes to get more land. So the labor unions were in cahoots, if you will, with the states and the union to get this land and push these Indians north to do what? Put them in projects. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what I'm saying. If I'm missing something, please let me know. It says, as the LPSA ignored the demands, the Knights of Labor called the strike for November 1st, time to coincide with the critical rolling period of the crop. And when it had to harvest it, the process, the work stoppage threatened the entire sugarcane harvest for the year. The 1887 strike was the largest labor action in the industry, involving an estimated 10,000 workers, a tenth of whom were white. It was the first time a formal labor organization had led a strike in this region. Stop right there. It was the first time a formal labor organization, which all got started up north, held a strike in this region. What region was this? The 4 parishes where normally the swarthy people were. Remember, they got banned over there. They got told to go there. Due Division says if you don't have fiat currency, then how could you pay taxes? They were land rich. Why would a farmer need money?
Excellent point. This paper monopoly money. Come on now, this one. Don't get me to fussing.
So we're actually looking at how they were able to get some of the other land of the Indians that would not sell. Have the unions come in, unionize, and then strike and demand higher wages. Because if you own a business, this is the thing I always try to explain to people. I'm for fair wages. I am. But you got to realize sometimes as a business owner, you can only pay so many people to do the work because your family still got to eat. If you demand an increase in the wages I got to pay, now my family suffers. So that means now I got to cut somebody, because if I was able to afford 20 workers and there's an increase in demand, now I have to cut 10 workers. Now you mad at me because I cut 10 workers, but you demanded they get an increase in pay. I'm just saying, something to think about. Due Division says union equal German, Irish, Scots, and their wooden shoes. Exactly. These were those immigrants that came down and came to the unions to take over the land. Remember, it was called a war. It was a union against a confederate, right? What is a confederation? Indians that come together to do what? Fight. Who are they fighting? The unions. Who had the unions? The Germans, the Irish, the Scots, the people with the wooden shoes. Get it?
You ain't hear about no American Indian Union at this time yet.
Nope. So the unions that were being fought, the union that we were fighting was the labor union. Because remember, these workers are demanding higher wages now, because they were no longer in a situation to where slavery or Slavs working for freedom was working. You also have now a different system of pay, a different system of work.
Look at it this way. Go back to the North's original argument before the Civil War. It was they couldn't compete with the finances of the South. So how do you regulate that? You come in now and you say, okay, everybody working in the South has to make X and X amount of dollars, making it harder for the business owners to have higher capital or higher profit. That's what they did. Remember what the whole argument of the whole Civil War was about. It was about finances, because the North couldn't compete with the land or the prices that the South was able to get work done at. It's still like that to this day. Yep. You notice in the North, you got the higher wages compared to the South.
And
you got the majority of the unions in the North.
Exactly. And if you know anything about economics and finance, a business's largest expense is wages and labor. That's their largest expense. According to accounting practice, you should keep your wages and expenses to 12% of your profit. Anything over that is too much, which basically reduces the amount of people that you can hire to do the job. So if they come in and say you need to raise the wages, you're basically throwing off a business's books and affecting their profit, which affects their ability to pay people. You got to realize the business owners that they were talking about, that they were targeting, were our family members, our relatives. They're making it seem like they were all white, but they weren't. There may have been some, but remember, the ones that were adopted Indians, because they were part of the Matisse. Go ahead, Bones.
Now, y'all, let's peep the play. Hard hats on for this. Remember the 13th Amendment. Slavery or involuntary servitude is illegal unless convicted of a crime. So now you turn around and you make it hard for our melanated ancestors to have any form of employment, which was illegal. So now you arrest them and you put them in slavery working for free, boosting your profits.
Prison system population makes those numbers make more sense.
Exactly. They just was doing the prison system. We read the precursor to this. We read the two precursors to this. The two land cession acts was the precursor to the Emancipation Proclamation. So by knowing them two, we know what's going on. They're creating a class. They're shifting one class over and putting them over here. All right, we're going to keep a workforce. Remember, the deal was they had to find some way to work it out for the South so the South don't lose. So what they did was simple. You can have your slavery, but to make it legal, they have to be convicted of a crime first. The majority of your prisons to this day is still where? In the South.
Yep.
It's easier to this day to get incarcerated where? In the South.
And let's not forget, there were five. Remember, there were members of the 5 nations, 5 civilized tribes that also declared Dutch and European. Black Dutch and Black European. But they could do what? They could pass for white. Who's to say they didn't declare themselves as white and now they're the landowners? And their ancestors or their relatives were the ones that were working on the land. You still have Indian on Indian.
If it was about the treatment of people, so how after the American Civil War you get Jim Crow laws? What was the federal government?
Exactly.
If they cared that much, how do you have terrorist groups? Terrorist groups that's setting up and murdering and harassing people, but you do nothing. So what was the Civil War really about? Shifting classes. The North wanted a piece of the action. The North had more of the factories, the industries. Think about it. You get jammed up in the South, sent to prison. Next thing you know, you up north someplace working. Think about what they do at the prison system. Relocate you to a whole nother area and send you out there to do some work.
So if we look at it from the way it actually was, The Union was nothing more than the Union organizations, aka your secret societies, coming down to the South and infiltrating these plantations with these workers on them, getting them to organize and demand wages and then higher wages, thus handicapping the plantation owners, aka the Indians. Because remember, they were already sharecropping for some particular, in some particular aspect, because you had all of these immigrants coming over. Remember, 7.5 million immigrants came over between 1820 and 1870. Where did they go? They went north. Then they migrated where? South, under the guise of what? Union soldiers, Confederate armies, confederations, Indians. So you had Union workers against Confederate Indians. I mean, it's not that hard. And if I'm missing something, let me know. So then you go from being a landowner to being a prisoner, and then in some instances, from being a landowner to working on the land that you used to own, because of the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. It said that by 1865, you either had two choices: to assimilate into civilization, aka give up your Indian status, or go live on a reservation.
And remember, the Confiscation Act is 1861, the first one. The second one is 1862. Emancipation, 1863. See the pattern?
In the 90s, Ice Cube had jacking for beats. These fools jacking for land.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they got
Relentlessly.
Remember, also stated 80 plantations got seized from the Freedmen's Bureau. So we see how they was taking a lot of this from our ancestors.
And who were they giving it to? Well, let's be honest. They were giving it to the immigrants, and they were giving to some of the Métis that were now passing as what? White.
How else did they get into the South? That's the question that has to be answered. If the Indians wasn't selling land to them, it wasn't allowing them in, how did they get into the South? How did they get into areas deep into Georgia? You're seeing how right now.
And you're noticing that there were tribes that were splitting up. Why did those tribes split up? Because some tribes that could pass decided to go out because they already knew what was going on, because they were the ones that actually were doing the negotiations. They were the ones that were actually being sent to France. They were the ones that were being sent to England. They were the ones that were being sent and talking to the kings and the representatives of these countries. They already knew what the plan was. Our other ancestors didn't. The swarthy ones didn't. That's why they separated. That's why the East is separated from the Sioux. The Sioux went out west. First they went north, then they went west. Go ahead, Bones.
Look at gentrification for what it really is. Assimilation. That's all it is. It causes you to assimilate because they come in and they redesign your neighborhood in their image, forcing you to assimilate to their way of life. Remember, the key was always to get us to want to live a European lifestyle. And some of us want to live it better than the Europeans.
Doodle Vision said the Creek split, the Choctaw split, the Sioux split. That's what that split was about. The Métis that could pass for white were the ones that end up being the chiefs and letting the Europeans, aka the immigrants, come in and get on this land. And while they was redrawing the borders, they was also drawing up the plan to get the original landholders, our ancestors, off the land. All this was planned. Now you understand why it's important to know who you are and where you're from?
Exactly. We always hear that they've been planning in advance. They had a head start and whatnot. But this is what actually has been put in place in order to get us into the situation that we're in right now. And if we don't learn from history, we are bound to repeat it again.
And the history,
so we got to get it right this time.
Right, and the history is broken up so much that we're not even putting the pieces together. You have the Indian Wars on one chapter. You have Jim Crow on another chapter. And then you have the strikes on another chapter. It's the same thing, same people, just different names.
Mm-hmm.
And also remember, a lot of these Matisse chiefs, they went on to become governors, politicians, senators, congressmen. A lot of your political leaders of today in this country tie back into them.
And here's the thing that's so interesting that you'll find out. In order to be a part of the majority of these secret societies, if not all or a lot of them, you have to do what, Bones? Genealogy.
Your genealogy.
Exactly. You have to know your genealogy to be a part of these secret societies. We can't even get people to do their genealogy to find out who their people are. It's sad.
Now you see the reason when they retell you these stories, they break them up. They don't never give it the appearance that it's all happening at the same time. That these acts tie right into the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one, leading us to this point to where we are today. And the longer we wait, every 10 years, they add another layer to the story. Mm-hmm. Who knows what title they about to come up with for 2020?
Remember, they still trying to send some of us to Ghana. To do what? Colonize.
Taking Negro off the census. Just think about what that does. Now you have a whole generation of ancestors that's lost in the sauce now.
Dude, not just a whole generation. My birth certificate says Negro. My parents' birth certificate says Negro. So that's 2 generations right there.
Trying to turn you into a neighborhood mess.
You know, I got ancestors who go back to the term Negro up until the daggone early 1800s. So you just basically wiping out a whole classification of people for what? To hide the fact that this was our land. We allowed some of our people that were mixed to come here, speak for us, take the land from us while they was working on our land, and then we end up working on land from them, and then we end up getting kicked out and being sent to projects.
Yep. Stolen identity. That's the true charge. It's stolen identity. And we've allowed a bunch, and I know that people use this word in a defamatory way, but I'm using it in the term of the definition. We've allowed too many proxies. Far too many proxies. No one should be speaking for you.
I am Fine Squirrel says identity theft. Doodle Vision says...
Yeah, why do you think they're hard on it? Why do you think they're so hard on identity theft? You notice all the things they did to put themselves in power, you bet not think about doing.
Right. Right. Switch up the game real quick before you could do exactly what I did. But at the end of the day, we don't have to be malicious or mischievous. All we have to do is go back through the same door we left out of.
Doodle Vision says 100 years from now, MLK is a Chinese immigrant from Pakistan. Exactly. Because he's swarthy. And so are some of them Chinese immigrants from Pakistan. Change his name to Mao Zedong or something. Ain't no telling.
Yeah, we got to get it right on our watch.
So it goes on to read, because we're still reading from the Thibodeau Massacre. It says the planters appealed to Louisiana Governor Samuel Douglas McHenry, who was also a planter. McHenry declared God Almighty has himself drawn a color line, called out at 10 infantry companies and an artillery company of the state militia, sending the latter to Thibodeau, the parish seat of heart and of the strike. They were to protect strike breakers and to suppress strikers. They evicted workers from the plantation housing. The militia suppressed strikers in St. Mary Parish, resulting in as many as 20 people killed or wounded on November 5th in Black Village of Pattersonville. So here's my question. Since when have you ever known for the military to be called in a labor dispute. When the NFL went on strike, was the National Guard called in? I'll wait.
Nope. Sound like when you have a agenda, that's when you do that.
Okay. There's labor strikes all the time. What about the labor strike that happened in Ford? Did they call the National Guard then?
Not even a pellet gun.
Okay, just checking. So why is it they calling in the National Guard now? And they're protecting the strikers. Gotta see the game here. It says the militia protected some 800 contract workers brought in to Terrebonne Parish and helped capture and arrest 550 strikers. Most of the union activities, the strikers collapsed there, and the workers returned to the plantation. I'm gonna tell you right now why they called those militia to protect them. Because the unions, remember, the unions had seceded from the state. When you secede from the state, you're no longer under their protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they sent their workers to a foreign land. So they had to send their protection, the military, to protect those workers, i.e. soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
No different than when I was in the military and they sent us somewhere. We were armed.
Yeah.
So the war was not a war fought on the battlefield. You gotta realize these unions were organized before the Civil War. They're just changing the date of when everything took place, when these battles took place. Because think about it. You just had a war from 1860 to 1865, right? That's supposed to have been the bloodiest war in history up until this day. Now all of a sudden you're having skirmishes with unions, and now it's the bloodiest confrontation in American history. Is that a coincidence? Or is that a coincidence? And this is less than 20 years later. Where are they getting all these people to kill them off? Unless it's the same story told 20 years later.
And also remember why they have to do this. Them 7.5 people from Ireland and them 7.5 million from Germany. Remember, they bringing in 14 million immigrants. They need someplace for them to go.
And where did these immigrants get nationalized at? They got nationalized up north, and then they end up going where?
Down south to work as contract workers.
So before they went down south, they had to get their assignment. They had to join what? A union. A union army.
Don't we have residuals of labor unions left?
Yeah, I was part of one.
No, I'm talking about even on the small end.
Yeah.
Where you go, they find you a job.
Doodle says contract work. Doodle says contract workers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about those temp agencies?
Look, labor finders, labor work buildings, it's the same thing.
Yeah, temp agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question. Could it be that those fairs were the docking place for the temp agencies?
Watch it now.
Job fairs. Doodle Vision said it.
That's it. That's why everybody in uniform for work. Employment. You're looking at different fields of employment to see what you're interested in, what you want to learn. Remember, they also had the schools at the same time teaching them these skill sets. They go hand in hand.
Were the World Fairs the first job fairs?
That's what it seemed like. Because why else would you need a passport? When you go to a
look
job,
at the exhibit.
And the topics.
Yeah, the topics and exhibits that they had. The skill sets.
Preparing you to come to work in the Americas.
So they were world job fairs. And they were letting you know, because they were bringing in exhibits from different areas, so you know what was available to you if you wanted to go live in that area and work. That's why it was called a World Fair. So they was holding these fairs over in Europe so you could know where to go in the United States. So you had a destination when you came over here.
They needed some way to prepare. Think about it. We know there's close to 15 million people. What other mechanism can you design to prepare 15 million people in a short period of time?
Job fairs. And they said these fairs lasted what? Sometimes 6 months
to a year.
Labor finders. Exactly. Politic 9, man.
Remember what they were saying? About 2,000 of them was coming out at a steady pace up into the 1900s a year. That's probably why them fairs lasted for so long. Constantly getting people in, signing them up, bringing them over. Getting over here, working off your debts and stuff. Then all of a sudden they get enough of them over here. All right, we finna implement this new system. We ain't finna pay you money no more. We finna give you these IOUs. You waiting 2 weeks to get your money, but them bill collectors, they don't understand that. You gotta go.
Carpetbaggers said these world fairs were the beginning of the establishment of transhumanism, which is where all of this is headed. But that is a convo for a different time.
Dun.
David Corey says, hold on, don't sell out. See, you running credits.
All is fair in love and war. Oh my goodness.
Doodle Vision says Italian. I know, right? Doodle Vision says Italians were sent to Atlantic Coast region to work the vineyards. Scottish were sent to the south to harvest potatoes and corn. Why? Because that's what they ate. Because our ancestors were sending them their food. Go ahead, Bones.
Remember, the majority of the Scottish were able to blend into the South because they were swarthy. What they said about the Black Scots and Black Dutch when they came, a lot of them went south because they was able to fit in and blend in.
Remember, you ain't had no AC at this time. You weren't working indoors. You was working outside. And if you ever lived in the South, you know it get hot.
Mercy me, it does.
And remember, there were some people who I think it was somebody in chat who said one of their ancestors moved down south and was like, yo, it's too hot. They ended up going up north because it was cooler. So when they talk about the transatlantic slave trade, now you have a better understanding or understanding exactly what they meant.
Transportation of employees.
Trading out workers. Trading out land ownership. A reconstruction of who owns what and who has power where. Yeah, I like the heat too, Golden Moon.
I'm with y'all on that, definitely.
So, I mean, that's what we have to pay attention to. We have to always be paying attention and be aware of the timelines. There are still Indian wars going on. They're still trying to take land any way they can. This was not a one-trick pony or one-trick strike. They were striking on multiple levels, on multiple effects. Confiscating lands by law, having the unions come in and increase the wages and drop production. The quickest way to halt the company to its knees is to stop a work stoppage. Just because your income stop, your bills don't stop. Something you gotta think about. It says many of the black workers in LaForge Parish retreated after eviction to the crowded African American section of Thibodaux, and the state militia withdrew. Stop. Wait a minute. Many of the black workers in LaForge Parish retreated after eviction to the crowded African American section of Thibodaux, and the state militia withdrew. They left it up to local officials to manage from there. Why did they leave after the black workers left?
You forced them into an area. You ran them off.
So that means it was their land.
Yep. You forced them into these ghettos now. Easy to round them up, easy to control them. Then what you start doing, you start causing natural infighting. Too many people in close proximity and not enough resources.
Now, also, I know in Virginia and Maryland at this particular time, because remember that newsletter we read that during the 1850s and 1860s, especially in Virginia and Maryland, that if you crossed the state lines and you were not a resident there, they could ship you to Africa. Remember that? So if they're getting people to cross state lines and they're not citizens of, they need people to go to Africa anyway and colonize. Why would it just be easier for them to ship them off or either send them to jail? Because why would the local officials need to manage them from there if only thing that they're doing is striking? What law were they breaking for the local officials to manage? And then it says
the Compensation Act.
Then it goes on and says Parish District Judge Taylor Betty. Remember who was he part of? The White Knights. This is Knights of the White he was a part of the Knights of the White Camelia. And it said he owned Orange Grove Plantation and was a member of the LPSA announced formation of the Peace and Order Committee in Thibodaux. He declared martial law and recruited 300 white men for this committee to serve as paramilitary group. Why were they getting up military and police for? And why did he declare martial law? He ordered blacks within the city. Right. He ordered blacks within the city limits to show a pass to enter or leave. Remember, I just talked about this. Why did you need a pass to enter or leave? Because you could not cross the border without a passport. So how do you get people? You could not cross the state line without a passport. You had to show a pass to enter or leave. Don't you got to do that when you get on a plane?
Yep.
You're going out of the country.
Oh, okay. Aren't they doing that again now with the ID?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Cycles.
So because they were forced out of their location, those people weren't from Thibodaux. They were from other areas. So then it goes on to read, like many top-ranking white state officials, Betty was an ex-Confederate and former slaveholder. He was a former member of the Knights of White Camelia and a paramilitary group that worked to suppress black Republican voting during the Reconstruction. So remember, the Republicans were in power at this time. So if they were in power, where were the landowners? Wouldn't you think the landowners that voted them there, didn't they have some voting rights? Didn't they have some power? How did they get all those Republicans? How did they get all those swarthy people in the office if many of them weren't prominent, wealthy landowners? AKA swarthy Indians. They voted them in.
You're making too much sense right now. I'm sorry. Just too much sense.
Think about it.
Hold on. I got to find out where. Oh, there we go. Somebody at the door. What it do, James? Come on, man. Help this make sense, man. Tie up some loose ends. Let me know where I'm wrong at, where I'm off kilter. I really could see.
Go and drop it like it's hot.
James.
I just want to say greetings to all. This is Larry from upstairs. Just want to know if Jack wanted to hang out and go to the bistro.
There we go.
Please, James.
No, y'all go ahead and continue. I want to say greetings to all the panel, those in the chat. Keep going, because you're right on the path, and it's is going to lead to something, which is going to lead to something, which is going to lead to something else. Go ahead, keep going.
You know I hate when you do that, right? No pressure, right? Okay, so now you're dealing with these passports. So because they could not leave, obviously they was breaking the law. Remember, what did the 13th Amendment state? You could not be a slave unless you was breaking the law. So now these people get forced out of their boundaries and their location, these police states that Dude was telling us about. So if you left your police state, you broke curfew, now you broke the law. Now they have the right to declare what? Martial law, recruited 300 white men. Why? Because this was a large area of swarthy people. So then it says Betty ordered the paramilitary to close the entrances to the city on the morning of November 22nd and stand guard. Why would they do that? Why would they close the entrances to the city on the morning of November 22nd and stand guard? Because they didn't want our ancestors to have any help. You know, you come for one of us, you come for all of us. Right? The strikers resisted being boxed in and fired on two of the pickets, injuring both. The committee and other white vigilantes immediately started to round up and kill black workers and their families, starting 3 days of violence against mostly unarmed blacks. They targeted known and suspected Knights of Labor organizers. The blacks were murdered in the town and where they tried to hide in surrounding woods and swamps. Bodies were sometimes left in shallow graves or the swamps. On Monday, 2 Negroes were shot. A man named Watson died, and a second man named Morris Parrish was painfully wounded. After 2 white men were injured, a voluntary company went out to the Negro settlement and claimed to have been fired upon. So check this out. It says, on Monday, 2 Negroes were shot. A man named Watson died, and a second man, Morris Page, was painfully wounded. After 2 white men were injured, a voluntary company went out to the Negro settlement and claimed to have been fired upon. They captured several shotguns while fatally shooting 6 Negroes and wounding 4 others. So this was basically a war, and these swarthy people weren't having it, so they was shooting at Whitey. On November 26, 1887, the bodies of 3 blacks were found in a thicket on the island Rionez plantation. It was believed that they were wounded on Wednesday and had been taking refuge where they were later found dead. The black newspaper described the scene. 6 killed and 5 wounded is what the daily papers were said. But from an eyewitness to the whole transaction, we learned that no less than 35 full 30 Negroes have sacrificed their lives in the riot on Wednesday. Negroes were... Go ahead.
But if they couldn't read until they got schools, how you got so-called black newspapers? Who's reading them?
Stop it.
I'm saying,
You're making sense. Negroes were killed outright. Lame men and blind women shot. Children and hoary-headed grandsires restlessly swept down. The Negroes offered no resistance. They could not, as the killing was unexpected. Those of them not killed took to the woods, a majority of them finding refuge in this city. So this newspaper was written by another town. This account is a source for the casualty figure 35, according to the historical Rebecca Jarvis Scott. No credible official count of the victims of the Thibodeau massacre was ever made. Well, why wouldn't a newspaper be considered a credible source? Anyway, bodies continued to turn up in the shallow graves outside the town for weeks to come. Eric Arsene wrote the local white residential privately admitted more than 50 workers were murdered in Thibodeau, but the total was uncertain. Along the bayou of La Forge, black oral history was told of hundreds of casualties, including wounded and missing. James Keith Hogue contributed 50 deaths to the 3-day attacks by the parliamentary, saying that in addition, numerous Knights of Labor organizers disappeared over the next year. He likened these actions to the violence and intimidation by the White League in Louisiana in the 1870s when they suppressed black voting. Remember, they had to do all this to get blacks to stop voting and to take back over the government. How do you go from slavery to running the Republican Party and having so much political control and influence in less than 20 years, and you're not supposed to be able to read or write? Can somebody help me with that? No? Okay. After the map.
I
couldn't read them, but
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If that's the case, why none of the representatives from the South wrote no letters to so-called Africa for support? I'm just saying, though.
Because obviously they could write. They had a newspaper, right?
Not one senator. Think about it. Not one senator. Not one from the South wrote an international letter going to Africa, talking about the conditions and how they needed support.
Yeah, if they were from Africa,
Nobody.
they should. He's stupid. So then it goes on to say, white Democrats who dominated the state legislature soon passed laws for disenfranchisement of blacks, racial segregation of the Jim Crow rules. There was no more effort to organize sugar workers until the 1940s. It was then initiated in the context of increased civil rights activism after World War II. So stop right there. Hold on. Think about this. I'm going to also look at disenfranchisement. After the massacre, labor organization among sugar workers essentially was suspended. Plantation workers returned to work under the owner's terms. That means the union what? Left. Why? They wanted new ownership. You didn't need a union then. If the union's job was to make sure you had fair wages, why would the unions leave if they had won? Confiscation Act took hold. People got incarcerated, got moved. Now if the land is under new ownership, you don't need a union now. So where'd the unions go? They went back up north. There was not an organized sugar workers until 1940. This is in 1887. So you mean to tell me you don't need unions again for another 50 years? Why? So let's look at disenfranchisement of blacks. Let's see what that looks like. I'll put this in the chat. It reads, disenfranchisement after the Reconstruction era. In the United States of America was based on a series of laws, new constitutions, and practices in the South that were deliberately used to prevent black citizens from registering to vote and voting. These measures were enacted by the former Confederate states at the turn of the 20th century and by Oklahoma when it gained statehood in 1907. Stop. Bones? What was what happened in 1906? What was one of the biggest complaints in 1906?
There was too many of us, so they went to Congress and on the congressional floor made the complaint to change it. That's by 1920. That's when we legally, because we didn't get the term legally black until 1920.
Okay. It says these measures were enacted by the former Confederate states at the turn of the 20th century and by Oklahoma. Where were a lot of the 5 civilized tribes go? Where did they go to?
West.
To general area.
To Oklahoma, right? And they gained statehood in 1907. Okay. Although not by former border slave states, their actions were designed to frustrate the objective of the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution ratified in 1870, which sought to protect the suffrage of freedmen after the American Civil War. Whose suffrage, though? People under the Union? During the latter elections in the Reconstruction era beginning in the 1870s, white Democrats used violence by paramilitary groups as well as fraud to suppress black Republican voters and turn Republicans out of office. Why do they need to return them out of office if they weren't in control? Why do they need to turn them out of office if all the blacks that came out of the South were illiterate, dumb, and didn't know anything and had to be taught everything. After regaining control of the state legislature, Democrats were alarmed by a late 19th century alliance between Republicans and populists that cost them some elections. After achieving control of the state legislature, white Democrats added their previous efforts and achieved widespread disenfranchisement by law from 1890 to 1908. Southern state legislatures passed new constitutions, constitutional amendments, and laws that made voter registration and voting more difficult, especially when administered by a white staff in a discriminatory way. Now, hold on. The Union isn't the North allowing this to happen? I thought the North didn't want there to be slavery. I thought the North were helping the swarthy people. I thought the North cared about the Indians. I thought it was the South that was doing. I thought it was the South that was doing all this and allowing all this to happen.
No.
You've been told.
Why is it that?
The truth of the matter is
Right. Why is it that all the unions started in Ohio and then came down south to interrupt what was going on down south? Ohio. There were some Indians. There was some prominent Indians that were out in Ohio. We're gonna let it alone though. They succeeded in the disenfranchisement of most of the black citizens as well as many poor whites in the South, and voter rolls dropped dramatically in each state. The Republican Party was nearly eliminated in the region for decades, and Democrats established one-party control through the southern states. Stop. The Republican Party was nearly eliminated in the region for decades. Until what, the 40s? The Democrats established a one-party control throughout the southern states. This is where the shift happens to where the South goes from Republican to Democrat. Why? Because they removed all of the swarthy Indians who were in the Republican Party out by either death or by laws.
And to answer the question to the chat, at this time, black and white, yes, it's still a status, but it's a status that they're starting to use as color on how you look now to put you in particular groups. Remember when you came up to the, the 1870 census, the first federal one, it was only 3 groups at this time.
Mm-hmm. Whites free, and all others, what was it, white slaves and all others free.
Yeah, it was whites, slaves, and free people of color were your 3 groups at this time. When it comes to status, now people self-identifying as black and white, you also got to remember that too. Depends on who's doing the talking.
Remember, you don't have the right to self-identify until 1970. Up until that point, you had enumerators, and some of your enumerators were marshals. Now, what did we find out about some of the people that were police officers? They came from where? The Klan?
They were the Innocents, an Italian group. Even like in the gangs in New York that was mentioned in the chat earlier, you'll see a lot of them went into the police departments. Yeah, they came from the north and they were in Louisiana heavily, doing a lot of violence.
So Antonio asked a question. He says, "Are the Europeans at this time are they white or are they black?" Both.
Both. Everybody just being lumped in 3 categories at this time. But remember, this is on a federal level, everybody being lumped in the 3 categories. The state census, each state did their census differently.
So Antonio says, and some of the ancestors were classified as white if they abided, but if they did, they were classified as non-free. It depends on where you're located, Antonio. So let's continue with let's go with the disenfranchisement. So from 1890 to 1908, Southern state legislatures passed new constitutional amendments, and laws that made voting registration and voting more difficult, especially when administered by white staff in a discriminatory way. They succeeded in disenfranchising most of the black citizens, as well as many poor whites in the South, and voter rolls dropped dramatically in each state. The Republican Party was nearly eliminated in the region for decades, and Democrats established a one-party control through the southern states. So that means the southern states are still under Democratic rule.
Oh, and to answer Pamela's question, yes, there was a time, a period before this, where a person of pale skin could have been classified as white or Negro, depending on particular features and who their parents were. This is at the time when they're Reconstruction. So during Reconstruction, they did away with all that and started breaking it. First federal census happens during the same time as Reconstruction, putting everybody in 3 categories.
Disenfranchisement had far-reaching effects in Congress, where Democratic Solid South enjoyed about 25 extra seats in Congress for each decade between 1903 and 1953. Also, the Democratic dominance in the South meant that Southern senators and representatives became entrenched in Congress. Now remember, during this time, you had Indians or Métis that were sitting as senators too. Remember, they were the traitors. Let's not forget that. They favored seniority privileges in Congress, which became the standard by 1920, and Southerners controlled chairmanship and important committees, as well as leadership of the National Democratic Party. So let's look at this. It says, Democratic dominance in the South meant that the Southern senators and representatives became entrenched in Congress. They favored seniority privileges in Congress. What does that mean when you have seniority privileges? You are favored because you've been doing something or been sitting in a seat the longest, right? That's a union situation. So the Congress became unionized.
Yep, that's how they locked us out. Remember when King said they locked us out? They used the unions to lock us out, because you needed particular forms of identification to prove who you are. But if I ran you away from your home, you didn't take no paperwork, nothing to say who you was, how you gonna participate now? Forcefully locking you out of the system.
And Doodle Vision makes a great point. He says, are the back chats a union? I don't know, Doodle. I mean, if you ain't been around the longest, or you ain't been around a long time, then, you kind of looked at it as kind of crazy. And it doesn't matter or not whether you can prove anything you say, but because you've been on YouTube for a long period of time, then your respect is demanded, not only by the YouTuber themselves, but by the people in the chat. Proof is a problem, but only for those that don't have any. So because of that union tactic, you don't have to have proof. You just have to have enough YouTube followers with ratchets to block people out that can bring proof. So maybe those back chats are unions. I don't know. It's the same tactic. You tell me. So then it goes on to read, favorite seniority privileges in Congress became the standard by 1920, and Southerners controlled chairmanships and important committees, as well as a leadership of the National Democratic Party. During the Great Depression, legislation establishing numerous national social programs were passed without the representation of African Americans, leading to gaps in program coverage and discrimination against them in operations. In addition, because black Southerners were not listed on local voter rolls, they were automatically excluded from serving in local courts. Juries were all white across the South. Political disenfranchisement did not end until after passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, which authorized the federal government to monitor voting registration practices and elections. So let's look at this. When does the Civil War reportedly end? 1865, right? After 1865, what did they start? The Jim Crow laws, poll tax, and all that stuff to do what? Get control of the what? The vote, right? They didn't correct this for over 100 years. Do y'all hear me?
That's that 100-year head start. You want to know what they be talking about? That's here. For 100 years, they locked our ancestors out of the system. They didn't have a voice.
And now we're locking ourselves out of the system. Right, Antonio? It still ain't corrected because don't nobody vote. Don't nobody care. They just want to throw a piece of paper in the air and think that the government is going to automatically just acquiesce to it.
They got it programmed in your head that you can't affect change. Majority of our people, when you talk about it, they know there's something wrong with it. They know that something has to be changed. But the majority will say, oh, what can we do? That's my program. But it's kind of funny. We won't do that, but we'll pick up the program that tells us to go out and destroy our own neighborhoods. Crazy.
Yeah, no snitching. Come in my neighborhood, and I don't know I'm snitching, but you catching hot rocks. Believe that. David Corey says, vote for who? Trump or Hillary? Here's the thing, David. Your most influential people never get elected because no one votes in local elections.
Bingo. That's where your real influence is. There's nothing that you can do on the federal level. Not from outside.
So if you don't even know who your politicians are, if you don't even talk to those people, and this is where YouTube emulates the masses. Everybody wants to do stuff on a federal or global level, but they don't do nothing in their own communities. How is it that you got more followers the furthest away from you than you have in your own neighborhood? How do you expect to exact change locally? I mean, how do you expect to exact change globally when you can't even exact change in your neighborhood? That's the reason why we're in the situation that we're in. You want to talk about solving a problem? Get off your butts. Get out in front of the community. Get in front of the community. Stop trying to reach people in Texas that don't know you. Stop trying to reach people in Maryland that don't know you. How about talk to your neighbor? You know when you're taking out your trash? You know that person that's right beside you? You know when you're out in the neighborhood doing stuff and buying stuff and looking for goods and services? Why not talk to those people? You got a footprint of 10 people in your community that know who you are, but you got over 12,000 followers everywhere else. How is that helping where you live? How is that helping your community? It's not. Because if something go down in your community, are those people going to come to where you live and help you? I'll wait.
And to answer a lot of the questions in the chat, who do we pick to represent us as not a turncoat? We represent us. We start taking this information and we start teaching the next generation our truth. And yes, you can see a lot of the scandals that go along in politics. But you know what the difference is with this way? Once you start getting into the local politics, not just you, other like-minded people like you, your mayors, your congressmen, your boards, then in that city, you can affect the change. Then from there, you can work with other people like-minded in other cities in your state. But we got to be willing to do the groundwork first. Yes, everybody want to see the day to where we can just walk in, kick our feet up, and it's all good. But we must be willing to do the work to get there. We can't get caught up in the fantasy of what it would be like or how it would feel and forget to do the work.
And that's
it's time to start.
Go ahead, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
It's time to start getting out and start activating. That's real activation. How did our ancestors do it? They didn't sit back and think about it and politic about it. They went out and got active. They had way more harsher conditions. Their lives were actually literally threatened. And some still stood their ground. That's why we're able to even have this conversation this rising. So in their memory, Why don't we just start by talking, like Tim said, to your neighbors? Start finding out what political things are going on in your local area. Find out who sits on what seats. I can tell you easily, you could go down there and find out there's a lot of seats that's opening up. Let's start taking this info and start showing our younger generation how this works. Your voice do count. We just have to know how to use it right and where to focus it. Stop yelling at the boogeyman. Stop yelling at things that we have no control of the outcome, giving our energy away for free.
Here's what I discovered.
It only takes one, relatives, and that's a blueprint for many more to follow.
Here's what I discovered, Bones. Many people that talk the loudest on YouTube scared of white folks. And what I mean by scared of white folks, I mean just scared to hold a conversation with them. Here's my challenge. If you so big, and you so bold, and you such a renegade Indian, do me a favor, take that phone that's got that camera on it. Won't you take a picture or video you having a conversation with a local politician in your neighborhood that don't look like you, where you trying to exact change in your community, or are you too scared? I'm going to call you out. I think you're scared. Because it's easy to talk to somebody that look like you that ain't in control than it is to talk to somebody that don't look like you that is. So if you're scared, say you're scared. But get from behind that YouTube icon and get off your butt and do something. Or you can continue to do what you do. Ignore the call. Ignore your community and reach out to people in Texas. Reach out to people in other islands. Reach out to people in other countries. Because here's one thing I do know. Everywhere that you're reaching out, there's a United States military base already sitting over there. So stop it. I relinquish.
And also remember, voting is not European. They got voting from our ancestors. Europeans, they were ran by kings and queens that taught everybody what to do. They got over here and seen that we had councils, that we worked hand in hand together at one time. We taught them this system. Then they taught us how to forget our own system.
Antonio, what got our ancestors in this predicament is not following the code. What got our ancestors in this predicament is letting people in that we knew that weren't about nothing. When you find out that there's somebody that's corrupt in your house, or you find out you got a thief in your house, you kick the thief out your house. You don't let the thief take up shop. You don't let the thief marry your daughter. You don't let the thief have a whole bunch of other little thieves in your house and act like you don't see it. You don't kowtow and work with the thief. That's what got us into this situation. Let's not pretend that we don't know what got us into this situation. We got in this situation because we were too scared to open our mouths. Just like many of us are too scared to open our mouths on these YouTube chats when people are scamming people and taking their money. And because they have followers, we just sit around and be quiet and make the statement, well, I came here by myself, I'm going to leave by myself. But you don't do bills by yourself. I'm cool with everybody. A person that's cool with everybody usually ain't cool with nobody. That means I can't trust you. Go ahead, Bones.
They use the memories of the 1960s to keep us shook. By giving us the same old rhetorical speeches every year over and over. And it keeps us shook. It keeps us in that daze. It keeps us dreaming. When if you go back and you study that era, it wasn't a speech that made change. It was people actually got out and made change.
Unity. That's right. That's real.
Why did they have to come in and infiltrate our churches? Why? They had to infiltrate our churches because at one time our ancestors used them to mobilize to affect change.
That was their meeting spot.
Why they had to come in and break up our family dynamics? Because after they took that meeting spot, think about it, everybody getting together at grandma's house or auntie house, sitting down eating.
Right.
The kids sitting at one table playing, but what were the grown-ups doing? Sitting down making plans for the future. Mm-hmm. That's how we mobilize. Right. We have to stop being afraid of ourselves, because that's who they got us running from. They got us running from ourselves. Step back into who we supposed to be. We know what we supposed to do. In the reality, my relatives, a lot of us, even myself included, we suffer from this colonized mind. that makes us want to hold on to these things that we know are detrimental to our futures. If our children and their children mean something, we must be willing to give something. Or sit back and wait till they question us. Oh, y'all knew. Y'all all on the internet. Y'all's all in the chat. Y'all ain't do nothing but show up and talk about it and left us with the work. I can't speak for nobody else, but I'm not trying to be in that situation. We are here for a real reason. It's not to see how well we like each other, where we can meet up and go and hang out. No, it's to affect this change that's needed badly, long overdue.
Right.
So Bones, I'm gonna give an example of how talking gets nothing done and how actually doing something gives something done. Y'all familiar with Danielle Jefferson and In My Bag tour, correct?
Absolutely.
So 3 young people, all under the age of 25, came together in April of 2019 and have already given over 250 book bags and 100 appreciation cards to teachers in one city, and they're about to do it for another city this coming week. Do they have a YouTube channel? Do they get on YouTube every week or every other week and talk about what they're going to do? Or did they just do it? I'll wait. You got people that's been on YouTube that ain't giving a book back to nobody, and they've been on YouTube for 3 years. I'll repeat that. You got people that's been on YouTube for 3 years, ain't giving a book back to nobody, and all they do is talk. But you got 3 kids coming out of college that's giving over 250 book bags to one city and about to give another 250 book bags to another city in Philly. 3 kids. And I say kids because I'm significantly older than them. And it's recorded, it's documented, it's proven. So what are y'all doing? What are you scared of? You letting a bunch of 22 and 23 and 24-year-olds make you look foolish, and they don't even need a YouTube following to get it done. They're out there doing the work while you sitting on your hind parts talking about some, we been here, we doing a lot of stuff, but you ain't showing jack. And you got 3 people half your age doing all the work. The youngsters making y'all look stupid. So either to put up or shut up. And it sounds like y'all shutting up because y'all showing enough ain't putting up. There's a difference between doing the work and talking about doing the work. Talking about doing the work is proof is a problem and you can't show any, but you always talk about what you've done. Doing the work is actually getting it done and then showing what you did. So which person are you? What category do you fit in? And this is not a shot at anybody in particular, but hit dogs do holler. I relinquish the mic.
So I'm taking shots. Can I clarify something? Because I don't want David Corey, my man, 50 grand, because he's a barber by profession. What I'm talking about hanging out in the barber shop. Do y'all remember that scene from Coming to America? And the guy that was sitting there, Eddie Murphy, was playing him, and he was talking about, he did the joke about the soup. And he's like, there's a spoon. Where he's like, aha.
Exactly.
What was his job? Can anybody tell me what his job was? He had no job. He was just hanging out in the barbershop. That's not a community build. You hanging out in the barbershop is not a community build. Even the hustler would come in, and we know about the barbershop with Ice Cube, would come in selling TVs and everything else that just fell off the back of the truck. He had a job, but there were people just hanging out. You hanging out somewhere is not a community build. It's not.
Sounds like gossip to me.
And when you sit around and you can talk about everything and all the things that connected with the one that's in the White House, ones that are running, but you can't name who your mayor is, something is wrong with that. If you don't know who your commissioners are, if you don't know who your aldermen are, then something is wrong with that. It should be to the point to where they acknowledge you. They should know your face and know the issues that are dealing with your community. And it does not take a Patreon account nor a PayPal account talking about send me some dollars so I can do this bill so I can help to make a difference in your community. It doesn't cost you a dime, as my grandmother used to say, it don't cost you a dime to pay attention. I yield the mic.
Pearls of wisdom.
David Corey said they won't hang with me because I talk Indian, talk every day, all day. That's the problem, David. All we doing is talking. What are we doing? We intimating things are getting done. Ain't nobody seeing nothing get done. Like I said, this community, the conscious community, was all about showing and proving it originally. Now it's about showing up, talking about what you do that can't nobody see. Clandestine movements. Which is funny because if you're doing everything in the back chat, then the people that you're supposed to be working against are the only ones that know what you're doing because they're the ones that can record it. Patriot Act.
Oh man!
But the people that need your help, but the people that don't need, but the people that really need your help and really need to see some resources and need to see some resolve, don't see anything. I mean, proof is not a problem over here. I'm just saying. David Court says we had a barbecue for the homeless. David, here's the thing that we need the community to do. And this is any community. I'm not just talking about this chat. I'm talking about all communities. That stuff needs to be recorded so people can see that there are people doing something. Because if you think about it, the only news that we see is bad news. No one ever sees anybody doing anything good. That's the problem. Because no one thinks that there are any good people anymore. So people get on YouTube and all they talk about is what the problem is. Very few people talk about the solution. Then even fewer people go out and actually work on a solution and then come back and show it. So David, if that's the case, then what we need to do is we need to do a community spotlight on you so you can show that you're actually in your community doing something. And this is not to brag. It's to show people that it can be done. Because if you did it, somebody else can do it. Does that make sense?
And look at it this way. We have a 24-hour television network. We have a 24-hour radio network. But it does no good if we don't put the content there. When I mean we is this, we all complain about what's on broadcast television, cable television, what's on the airwaves. We have the mechanism to change it, but we got to be willing to do the work. We got to be willing to pick and choose what images and what sounds will represent us moving forward, or fall a victim to the same conditions before.
You mean there's a website and a television network and you didn't contact the president, nor did you get a PayPal or Patreon account?
Nope. American Indian Network Television. You can check it out on the website. It's 24 hours and will always be free.
No super chat?
Nope.
Here's the way I look at things, and this is just me, and I could be wrong, and I'm gonna be wrong. I've been wrong before. If we are such bad renegade Indians, like our ancestors, I mean, if we really bad, let's be real. If you really that bad, why are we taking money from our own ancestors? Why are we taking money from our own people? If you really bad, go get money from people that don't look like you. And I don't mean steal it. Stop taking from your own people. Get money from people that don't look like you. And help your community. Again, I'm not saying rob. The money is out there. Go get it. Stop taking from your own community.
Right.
Stop banging on your chest talking about how you a renegade and how you this and how you that and you gonna take something. Like I said, I wish somebody would come over here and take something. You gonna leave with something. And there are a lot of people that feel that way. Going over to an Indian reservation talking about taking something. You gonna leave with something, but it ain't gonna be what you think you're gonna leave with. Cause it's easy to talk. It's hard to walk.
Look at it this way. Every day we will be posting USDA grant information on the USDA program section in the forum on the website. There's almost Tim, about 9 come in a day.
Exactly. And Antonio
We can't
says,
do them all.
nope, we can't. And Antonio says, but we should invest in our community. Yeah, Antonio, I'm not saying don't invest in your community. That's what nonprofits do. Investing in your community is not always about money. The most valuable thing that you can give is time, like what everybody's doing today. Being on this chat and contributing. If you notice when we sign off, we always talk about letting the chat go out and do something in their community. Because that's what we expect. We don't expect you to get off this chat or get off any chat and then go get on another chat and veg out all day, listen to people complain. The goal is to take this information and go out and do something with it. And you're right, Antonio, and that was another thing. Remember, the Indian agent's job was to do what? Kill the Indian, save the man. And the way they did that is by taking them out of community living, making them be selfish. Selfish, English, Spanish. What does ish mean? Sort
What
of
is
Something
it?
like,
something like.
similar to.
So if you're being selfish, you're not even being yourself. You're being like who? Them. Because they're concerned about themselves. Who does that sound like? My Patreon, my info, my data, my website. Who does that sound like? That don't sound like us. We were communal. We worked together. We did things for the good of the whole and not for the good of one. So if we really serious about breaking these spells, we gotta start locally. Cause I promise you, ain't nobody in my community, if they don't know you, they don't care what your YouTube following is. They're not messing with you. And don't take what we're saying as a direct shot at anybody. What we're saying is these are solutions that we're offering instead of doing what everybody else is doing or what they're showing that they're doing. This platform is for a reason. To get people activated and get out and do something. That's why the show doesn't last that long. If you on our show for 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours, you're not being productive. You can always get more money. The one thing that you can never get back is time. So how are you investing your time? And what are you doing with your time after you watch these YouTube channels? Hold on, see what they say here. So that's something we got to think about. How are you investing your time when you leave these chats, these back chats, these channels? What are you doing? Because here's the thing. There is so much information that's being provided on the chats. And I'm sure there are a lot of other channels that are doing a lot of good work. And they probably have the same challenges that we have. Everybody just want to come and hang out, but very few people want to do anything. And you don't really need a lot of time to do something. Just start where you're at. If you can only spend 10 to 15 minutes a day just researching HUD-3 or USDA or working on your bylaws or trying to start your business, that's 10 to 15 minutes that you've invested into not only yourself, but into your children's future. Mike Easton says, what channel do I have to go on to see about these grants? You can go on to toxicsassembly.com and that grant information is posted in the website. And that stuff is being posted every day. And you can also check on the videos that have been posted on Cab Grand Rising YouTube channel and also a Toxic Assembly YouTube channel. There's lots of information. Problem is that people, for whatever reason, aren't taking advantage of it. They're not reaching out to us. I mean, in this free country, do what you want to do. But when you don't take advantage of the information that's been provided to you, you lose your right to complain. And Copper India brought up a good point. He says that many of us voted for President Barack Obama, because of the color of his skin. And he says every organization got something out of it but us. That's telling. What did our community get out of him being president? Big fat zero. Big fat goose egg.
Another proxy.
People getting upset with what's that rapper name? The wear the hat. What's his name? He'd been to see the president a couple of times. Kanye West. The question is what is he getting from that president? He getting something. He ain't going there to see him for nothing. He ain't scared to go talk to Trump. All y'all talking that smack about Trump, but most of y'all scared to go talk to him. Hell, y'all scared to talk to people that look like him. So again, you can bang your chest on YouTube, but your actions dictate who you scared of and who you don't talk to. So, does anybody got anything else that they want to say before we get up out of here and let these people go do some good work?
Yeah, when you said who was that rapper that wear the hat, I didn't know who you was talking about until you said that. See the president. Just so you...
I know sometimes I spit rapid, so it's all good.
He could be talking about anybody from any time.
Yeah, I mean, you could have just put it out there. Antonio says we happy being slaves. Yeah, we are, and that's the sad part. We've been indoctrinated. So
we are not homeborn slaves. Goodness gracious. I have to stop thinking that way in all aspects. And especially that crabs in a barrel mentality. Like, for real. Enough is enough with all that. I don't even have words to even put towards that because I have zero energy for that. But when you know better, you do better. So come on, let's start rising and doing better as opposed to just talking about it.
Exactly. And when you do better, you get better. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And talking about it does not constitute doing.
I'd rather save my talking for my days of having silver hair, rocking back and forth on a porch, watching the grands play in the yard. I'd much rather use that time to sit and talk about what we did in order to accomplish what we're beholding, as opposed to just railing every day.
Well, hopefully we can continue to be an example and show what is possible by actually doing and helping the community to do, because I understand that it's very frustrating when all you're seeing is depictions of us doing nothing more than dribbling a basketball and shaking our backsides and being on Basketball Housewives and all this other stuff. But that does not constitute who we are as a people. That's a small minority of what they want the world to see us as.
Right.
We have control of our own narrative. How do you want to be viewed? That's the question. Your actions will dictate how you want to be viewed. Don't let somebody write your story. Write your own story.
Lady J brought up a valid point. And that's what a prime example of what I'm talking about, just hanging out. She mentioned a fresh fry and a dance off. That's just hanging out. That's not a community build. I charge anyone, the next time you want to do a community build, I'm not saying don't feed the people. And I know people don't like this book, but they know about this story in the collection of books that's called the Bible. When a certain person came to town with several of his followers, he gave instructions on how to build a community, and then he fed them 5 loaves and 2 fish. So next time, when you do a community build, a community gathering, I'm not saying don't feed the people, but don't feed them, don't serve the food until after concrete solutions have come into effect, and then delegate or designate who's going to be responsible and give a report. That's how you do it. You cut off the food supply, everything else starts to get right. So that's one way to do it if you're talking about community build. But the next thing, it don't cost you a dime. Everybody that's on this line has some form of communication. You have a smartphone, you have a computer, you have a laptop, you have a tablet, you have a Mac, you have something. I challenge you, before the end of this week, send an email out to your mayor. Send an email out to your local representative and let them know this is what's going on in the community. And you will be surprised. They will actually come out and meet with you And they'll at least provide cookies and punch. So you don't have to pay a dime. You don't. That's part of their responsibility. Whether you voted them in or whether you vote or not, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter in the past, but I'm telling you going forward, and I'm telling you what I know, is that they look at you and say, okay, what impact do you have in your community and what is your local voting record? They can care less on who you voted for on a national level, because the one that's in the White House is not coming to your house to see you. And I don't care whoever it was and has been in the past. Any city, if you live in a city that is 50,000 people or more, they have taken CDBG funds, community development of block grant funds. There are stipulations of taking those funds. And if they are not following through with what they're supposed to do, then you let them know, hey, you are in violation. It's as simple as asking questions. I'm not going to put anyone out there on the panel if they don't want to speak on it. But one individual just started asking questions in his local community. Not saying that one thing had to do with another, but all I know is a person that was not using funds has now found out that they were doing things of millions of dollars of mismanaging and misappropriating funds. Because one person decided, hey, let me pick up the horn and let me talk to some people, the local representatives in my community. It's real simple. It is really not that hard. It's really not. I yield this mic.
You're right, James. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, sell out. Go ahead, boss.
No, I'll just clear my throat.
Really? That's what we're doing. Just clearing out those. Anyway.
Get it this way. There's a form on the website. So all who's in the sound of this Rising's broadcast, if you're passionate about it, put it up in the forum so like-minded people can start gathering up. Start reaching out to the cities, and you can use the forum for the relatives that stay close by each other. Like I said, the mechanisms are here for you to use. They're free. A continence assembly will never charge you for these mechanisms, but they do you no good again if you do not use them. We know hangouts and stuff is changing. We know it's hard to have particular communication with the mechanisms you were used to using. That's why we have our own now. But if we don't use our own, what good is it?
And here's something that I want to talk to, because I'm reading the chat and I'm seeing some commentary, and blame is being placed. Again, I'm not here to tell you what you should do, how you should think, but here's one thing I do know. Instead of us placing the blame, let's be the example we want to see other people and other organizations be. Because again, unless your house is clean, we can't talk about somebody else's house being dirty. Something to think about. Because at the end of the day, the question can be asked is, what are you doing and can you prove it? And if you can't prove what you're doing, should we really be talking about what somebody else is not doing? Just a thought. Remember, if you live in that glass house, make sure you got your clothes on. And please don't be throwing no rocks.
I can give you an example of I'll think about all three facets that have come together and gathered in one place. Was, as I say, those religious, is Chicago. You had heavily Christian, your Baptist. You had your NOI, Nation of Islam, and you had the Moorish Science Temple, all coming together. What's going on in Chicago right now? So when we talk about these things and we talk about the movement, the majority of those that were doing the movement, because again, your faith, your religious beliefs, that's personal. I can work with anybody except a scammer. I don't care if you are a Wicca and you sit down and you are worshiping trees. You are a tree hugger. I can work with you as long as you're not a scammer. But we don't talk about the scammers. But you can't make a movement. You can't mention Dr. Martin Luther King without talking about the Christian. Don't quote Brother Malcolm. Yeah, that's out. Don't talk about any type of law dealing with Noble Drew Ali and the Circle 7. No, you can't mention any of that. None of that. So now, who are we limited to that who are our mentors, or who we looking up to, or what path are we going down? Or are you trailing your own blade? But no one wants to discuss and call out the scammers. I know some are saying, hey, I'm just shooting a shot in the air, but I'm former military, and when I shoot, it's to hit a target. So I'm hitting targets, and I'm gonna tell it like it is. If you say, hey, it's this group of people or that group of people, you'll find out it's just a people, period. You can deal with a group of people that are atheists hanging out in the corner, smoking an L and drinking J. And you can't get them to agree on anything except when it comes to pass the hat to go get another fifth. I yield this cotton picking mic.
And there you have it. So again, we're about solutions. We're not about blame. I'm not really concerned about nobody's personal beliefs. I'm concerned about what your action is. Because you could be the most spiritual person on the planet and then scam people. Do that make you a good person because you're so spiritual? Because it's not about your personal belief. It's about your particular activity. Because activity can be totally independent of your belief system. Because you can say you believe one thing and do something totally different. We see it all the time. I'm not concerned about what you believe. I'm concerned about what you do. So if you want to know why I don't deal with certain people, 9 times out of 10 is because they scam it. And anytime I call somebody a scammer, I got proof. Audio, video,
baby,
email, receipts, you name it, I got it. So I just don't be calling people scammers without proof. So know that to be true. And if you're calling me something, you better have proof. Or you will be on the other opposite end of what they call a discovery. And all your sovereign citizenship won't help it and it won't stop it. That's why some of y'all sitting in jail or have been in jail now. So with that being said, changing the subject. Here's the deal. We about to let y'all go out and do what y'all do and be a positive impact on y'all community, y'all relatives, and potentially your tribe. So we gonna let Lady Free give her salutations. So we can go ahead and let everybody do what they do best. Go ahead, Lady Free.
Remember who you are. Do your genealogy and change the world.
Alright. No sell out. What you got for us, boss?
Peace, everybody. Appreciate everybody for coming out. Links in the chat. Log on to the website. Check out the forum. Everything TMH said.
James Flames, Doodoo Vision, aka Choctaw Jimmy. Give us some words of wisdom before you part from us, brother.
Once again, I appreciate you all on the panel more than you will ever know. Those in the chat, definitely appreciate you all. Just keep following the breadcrumbs that lead you back to the table. When we keep that focus on looking at, I'm gonna say it anyway. I just call it Louisiana. Keep that focus on Louisiana and New Orleans, because I'm still waiting on Solomon Northrop to send his letter to Africa for his freedom. 12 years a slave, for those that don't know. Still trying to, figure out why did he try to send letters to New York. He wasn't sending letters to West Africa to get his freedom. Trying to figure that out. Somebody help me out with that, because he was sold a sugar plantation down in New Orleans, which is gonna still lead you down the path to getting Plessy versus Ferguson. And who was this Plessy, and why Louisiana plays such a prominent role? And we hear again, and we see again, always about the German Shepherd dogs and the water hoses, but they never show you the clips of the deacons for defense. Also in Louisiana. Maybe we'll get to that at a later time, later date. So you start to figure out why all these black codes noir, all this stuff starts coming into effect, and why it all came to a head in Louisiana. Then you'll understand. Those of y'all with your Crown air fresheners, which was contributing to David Duke. But I asked another subject for another time as well. I appreciate y'all. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing those bills. Keep asking those questions. And don't be the guy that's trying to tell the jokes about the soup in the barbershop. Aha! Aha! Where's the spoon? Remember what they told you in the Matrix. There is no spoon. And with that, I yield this cotton picking mic.
Can somebody just hang up? Can we just hang up? We can just hang up.
Yes, I agree. I'm hitting end now.
Really? This is what we doing?
Yeah.
We doing?
I don't know.
He dropped the bomb. I dropped the bomb.
I vote 3 ways.
Really?
Can I get a yes?
So don't nobody else need to say nothing. We just need to hang up right now. Just get off. Just get off the line. Well, look. At least let Bones take us out. Bones, take us out, Bones.
Yep, Bones, go ahead and get them 3rd degrees. Good.
No. Like we said, as we keep going through this information to find our story, to find out how it affects us, what things were put in place to put us in particular situations, not to sit back and complain about it, to point fingers about it, is so we would know what we have to do to get out of these situations. Again, like we say, use these programs, these applications that we bring out to the forefront so we can better ourselves on being self-sufficient, so we can make sure that we leave something for the next generation so they don't start in the same place that we were in. And on that note, we enjoy every time we get together and get to kick it with the relatives. These are some of the best days going on in my life, I tell you. So until we meet up again for tomorrow's show, everyone have a blissful day and peace.
Much love, everyone.
Mm-hmm.